Hey everyone, welcome to Washington Heights and welcome to those watching online and Weber County Jail. It's great to have you. I'm Pastor Jimmy.
I'm Pastor Mike.
Hopefully everyone got a program coming in. In that program's a connection card, and what do we like to do? Fill it out. So we found one filled out. Look at this. What does it say? Roy Cowboys Gruber. That's kind of weird.
The Cowboys aren't even in the playoffs anymore.
Yeah, they're not even in the play. But how is his middle name Cowboys? Let's see what he said in the back.
I love cats.
Yeah. Okay, and look at it. I need to do confession with Pastor Jimmy.
That's probably true.
It is true. It is true. We need to do it.
Hey, if you are new or joining us for the first time today, we just want to say thanks for being here. And after the service, at each one of our exits, you'll find a book out there called How Good is Good Enough. Simple read, just a little thank you from us to you for being with us today. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, buddy. Oh. What was that?
Blessed are those who are merciful.
Oh, I'll show you mercy. I'll show you mercy.
No,
I'll show
Jimmy,
you mercy.
no, Jimmy, no. Dude, no.
I'll show you mercy.
I don't even play the keys. That's not even my keyboard. I think it's Andrew's. So much for merciful. So another beatitude that we're covering today is, blessed are those who are pure in heart.
Ooh, I don't think I can cover that one.
No. But I mean...
No. No way are you covering it.
I mean...
No. I know you too well. We're not,
yeah,
no way.
You're right.
What about Roy?
Yeah, I think Pastor Roy. Let's hear from Pastor Roy and what he has to say about the next two beatitudes. It's like,
hi, I'm Pastor Jimmy.
Cool.
But my cheek still stings from you slapping me. Right here. Do I have a mark? What about pure-hearted baby here?
E.
Yeah, I found him in the nursery. I think he can cover it. Or she.
So I feel like I need to set the record straight. You know, I have this reputation for not liking cats. And I just, want to state for the record, I love cats. It's just that I can't eat one all by myself. So it's just as simple as that. So we are in a series entitled Be Happy, and we are looking at what Jesus said at the beginning of what is often called the Sermon on the Mount. And that section is referred to as the Beatitudes. What are the Beatitudes? They are declarations of blessing. What does that mean? It includes a measure of being fortunate. It includes a measure of happiness. It includes a measure of just being in the best possible place that a person can find themselves. And what's important about that is that it's not tied to what's happening around us. It happens regardless of what's happening circumstantially. It doesn't happen from the outside in, it happens from the inside out. And often in this world, as we go in search of what even our nation calls the pursuit of happiness, we don't often find it in the ways that we think. And so Jesus takes us in a whole different direction. And it definitely is the path less used. And maybe if we're searching for that best possible place that we could be no matter what, maybe we need to open our hearts and our minds and our lives to what it is that Jesus has for us. But what we're going to see today is that many times in this world, what we see as value isn't always what we recognize, and then what we recognize is not always of true value. And from God's perspective especially, we can get very confused about how we put things together, about where value lies or where a lack of value lies. And Jesus is going to help us sort some of that stuff out today. And it made me think about some real life situations in which an object of value was not seen for what it was. A few items that were bought very cheaply, but boy, did they have some value attached to it. Let me show you just a couple examples of that. Sean and Ricky McAvoy purchased this West Point sweater from a thrift store for 58 cents. The couple would never have imagined that the original owner of the sweater was none other than the football coaching legend Vince Lombardi. After seeing a documentary about Coach Lombardi, Ricky saw there was a Lombardi name stitched in the sweater, and they began to wonder if there truly was a connection and could it actually have some connection to him. The Heritage Auction House in Dallas, Texas was able to confirm the authenticity of the sweater by examining the type of fabric used and the different methods of stitching and all of that. The auction house appraised the sweater at $20,000. And it actually sold at auction for $43,020. Bought for 58 cents. Sometimes we don't see value for what it is. And if you think that is a big difference, Congress ordered William J. Stone to create 200 reproductions of the Declaration of Independence back in 1820. It was believed that only 35 of those 200 reproductions were in existence to date. Well, Michael Sparks, a Tennessee man, found a 36 that you see right there. Sparks was shopping at a garage sale, and he purchased some salt and pepper shakers along with this document for $2.48. Sounds like a hard negotiation, was underway there. After examining what he believed to be a cheap reprint copy, Sparks began to realize the engraving was far too intricate for a mass-produced copy. He confirmed his suspicions by searching online. It was authenticated by an auction house, and this sold at auction for $477,650,000. Purchased for $248. No word on the salt and pepper shakers, though. I don't think they were worth anything. One more example. Andy Fields, a British businessman, purchased what he believed to be a child's drawing at a yard sale in 2010 in Las Vegas. Fields was correct that a child did indeed draw this. However, he never imagined the child artist was world famous. The artist of this drawing was none other than the pop art pioneer Andy Warhol. Warhol sketched the drawing when he was around 10 years old and on his bed rest from suffering from cholera. The picture depicts a 1930 singer, Rudy Vallee. And this early piece of Andy Warhol that he bought for less than $10 was valued at over $2 million. $2 million. A lot of times we don't see value for what it is. And in what we're going to see today, we're going to see Jesus help us to understand how that can happen from God's perspective, especially about people like us. And we've been looking at the Beatitudes for a few weeks now, and we see a little change today from where we started, because the first 4 of the 8 took us in a vertical direction, and they had a lot to do with us and God, and where our hearts can be transformed by God from where they are all by ourselves. But now we see the transition to going more horizontally. And if we think, well, isn't faith really a vertical thing? Isn't it about me and God and my relationship with God? Well, it certainly includes that. But this is not going to be the only time that Jesus connects the vertical and the horizontal. One day he was asked by a teacher of the law, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? Could you just net it all out for us? What is it really all about? And I don't know about you, I love that question. I appreciate that, because there are so many different things that we can, encounter in the Bible, read in the Bible. What is it really all about? And on that day, Jesus' answer goes something like this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? And that's a vertical thing. And then he says, and the second one, whoa, we just asked what's the greatest. He says, now the second one is just like it. But it doesn't sound just like it, and it doesn't look just like it. He says, and the second, that's just like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on that. Everything that has been given to us is direction. What's it about? Loving God and loving the people who are around us. First 4 Beatitudes took us in a vertical direction. These next 4, the first 2 of which we're going to look at today, they take us more in that horizontal kind of direction. And this is often where the rubber meets the road. And just like weeks gone by, I think when we see what Jesus has to say that day and we unpack it a little bit and understand it and put it in terms that we can acknowledge, it's easy for us to nod our heads in agreement and say, yep, that's right, and that's the way it sounds, and it sounds good. It's a whole different thing to make that reality. Because where we often put things in the categories that we create are not the same that God has. And where we place value is often not where God places value. And we can get easily confused about those 2 things. So let's jump in and see what Jesus has to say, and then we're going to see another day in the life of Jesus where these attributes are on full display. First, Jesus says this: God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. You know, in the Bible, there are a lot of words that can sound and seem like they're interchangeable. You think of words like pity and compassion and kindness and grace. Are they all basically saying the same thing? Does merciful mean the same as all of those? And certainly there's some overlap of those words, but they also have some uniqueness to them. Pity has the idea that I feel badly for someone, but it never takes me to the point of action. And so I see the need and I feel for their need, but it never causes me or leads me to respond in any real kind of way. In fact, pity often reacts away from a need, whereas mercy draws us into a need. Compassion sees a need and it does respond, but it seems like it's the right thing to do. There's a need and I have the capability to respond, and so I do respond. Mercy is different in that it is unexpected response to someone's need. And it often sees past the place in life where somebody finds themselves, whether it be their own making or somebody else's. And it recognizes their need and responds to their need. But when that happens, it's often surprising, unexpected. For instance, you run a red light, you get pulled over by a cop, and the cop lets you off with a warning. That's mercy. The Cowboys go up in flames in a playoff game, and you don't text a Cowboy fan. That's mercy. Right? It's unexpected. You would think, well, I know what the response should be, but this is one of those where we might go, well, nobody should respond positively to that, but mercy says, oh, yes, I will. And so if we are going to paraphrase this, God blesses those who respond to the needs of others with forgiveness, kindness, and compassion, all of those put together, for that's what they will get. But it is unexpected. It is surprising. The other beatitude that Jesus shares that day is God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. Well, what does it mean to be pure in heart? What exactly in real terms does that mean? It has a couple meanings attached to it. One of them is a sense of integrity, that what you see is what you get, that there is no pretending, there's no acting. The opposite of pure in heart would be hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is a word that was very common around that time, and it came out of the acting realm, where in those days, to put on plays, and many of them were put on, it would be a relatively few amount of actors. They were all male, but they would be playing different characters, including both genders, and many times all they did to switch a role was hold a mask in front of their face, and now they were representing a different character in the play. So hypocrisy means to wear a mask. Pure in heart means no mask, no pretending, no acting, no being someone that you are not. You're just you, and all that that includes. That's one part of it. The other part of pure in heart has the idea, as you might imagine, of being cleansed, of being purified, and perhaps being washed for the first time or yet again. And so it's both of those ideas together. To paraphrase this one, what would it look like? God blesses those who have been purified from the inside out, made holy, made clean, for they will see God. And when we talk about seeing God, I think we can all recognize that sounds like a big deal, right? Jesus talking about who is it that gets to see God? Pure in heart. And he also says that, you know who God blesses? People who are merciful, who at times respond to need, even looking past where somebody might be in that moment. Now again, I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, you know what, that sounds good, and that sounds right, and that's what we should do. But with so many things, it's a whole lot easier to nod our heads in agreement than it is to make this real and to live it out. So what does it look like? And how can we get confused about what that might look like? Well, let's jump into a story. This is found in Luke chapter 7, and we're going to make our way through this story. And Jesus is going to put, I believe, both of these beatitudes on display. Merciful, pure in heart. Luke chapter 7. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him, so Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. Now, there's some cultural things going on here. In that culture 2,000 years ago, if you were a dignitary in a community and there was a visiting dignitary or a traveling teacher, and Jesus would fit that category, it was customary for you to invite them to your home, and you would invite all the other dignitaries of that community as well. And because, they lived in the climate they did, they didn't have all the walls and ceilings, that we do. And the community was also aware that this meeting was happening, and they could stand around outside of the courtyard, and they often showed up to listen to hear what was being discussed inside of that event. And the way that it would often work is, the guest, on this occasion, Jesus would come in and the host would kiss him on both cheeks, and then either he would wash her feet, but what was more customary was a slave would come and wash the feet, and that was a ceremonial type of thing, and wash the hands, and then they would pour either some oil or some perfume over his head because, let's face it, there weren't a whole lot of showers, and it was a much more enjoyable thing when, people could, not have to deal with the reality of not bathing a whole lot. And then people would recline around a table, and they would lie on their arm, and the guest of honor would have a specific place, and everybody would be heads toward the table, feet away from the table, and that event would unfold. Now, keep those customs in mind because Jesus is going to refer to them later. Because what should have happened on this occasion didn't, and it factors into this story. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. We're never given this woman's name. We do find out the host, his name is going to be Simon. We'll see that in a little bit. We never get her name, but we know something about her. She's referred to as an immoral woman. That means one of two things, according to the commentators. Either she's a prostitute or she is notorious for sleeping around. But whichever one of those realities it is, she's known for it and everybody understands who she is. And as I mentioned, people were welcome to view these events from the outside, but it was considered very inappropriate to step into that place. It was by invitation only, but here she comes into that very place. It also mentions an alabaster jar, and that was common in the trade of prostitution back in that day. And with an alabaster jar, you could only open it once. You couldn't reseal it, and so to open it meant you were just emptying it all out. And we're told it's not cheap. It's an expensive thing. What is she up to? Why did she come? And how will this all unfold? Because there are categories and there are customs that everybody knew very well. We don't understand them a lot the way they were then in our day, but they did. And she is not following the rules. Then she knelt behind him at his feet. How is she behind him at his feet? Remember, they're reclining on their arms. Their feet are toward the back. And she's behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. A couple things about this. No self-respecting woman in that culture would let her hair down in public. That was considered very provocative. It was something that only happened in your own bedroom. And so to do this in a public setting would have no doubt caused some jaws to open. And then she's, weeping, and she is pouring perfume on Jesus' feet, and all of that would be perceived as being across a whole bunch of different lines. And no doubt, as I looked around that room, people would have felt that this is entirely inappropriate. But let me tell you something else about kneeling and kissing feet from that day. If a general was victorious in battle over another general, and that losing general was brought before the conquering, the winning general, one of the things that he could do to beg for his life was to fall on his knees as an act of surrender and to kiss the feet of that conquering general. And then maybe, but maybe not, he was allowed to live. This posture that she takes is one of surrender. Why did she come that night? What is she looking for? And we're not given every aspect of understanding when it comes to that. But I think it's pretty easy for us to understand that she knew that there was something that Jesus had that she needed. And she was willing to commit herself to that, and she was willing to surrender to him. And we might think, well, isn't that great? What a beautiful picture of somebody maybe who has been notorious for all of these negative sort of things now, maybe wanting to turn her life around. Everybody is going to be great with this. Not so much. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She is a sinner. Now, this is just internal dialogue that we all have. And Simon's thinking, let's see what Jesus does, because we know how this works. In this world, if you want to claim to be from God, that means you're claiming purity. And if you're pure, you don't ever mix with anything that's impure, because when those contacts happen, the impurity pollutes what is pure. And so you repel that, you stay away from that, you have nothing to do with that. And if nothing else, you make the public statement that you don't approve of it. Now remember, that's his internal dialogue. It's an interesting sentence that comes next. Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Who is this guy that can answer the thoughts that somebody else has? Sometimes we might think, well, Jesus is a really smart guy. Well, he's that, but he's a whole lot more than that. He is God in the flesh who knows what Simon was thinking that day. He knows what I'm thinking every day. He knows what you're thinking every day. I mean, that is not a mystery to him. It is not hidden from him. Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Simon, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. That's like Jesus saying, I'd like to have a word with you about what you're thinking. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. And my guess is when he says that, he's optimistic, thinking, all right, now we're going to have a teachable moment here because somebody has just stepped across the lines. And now if Jesus is on the side that I think and hope that he is, he's going to make it very clear that's wrong. Everything else, and those who have dedicated their lives to being on the right side of that line, that's good and right, but this is wrong and she needs to get out. Surprise once again. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. And for us, it doesn't mean a whole lot. And this has been put into our terminology. And 500 pieces would be 2 years worth of salary. 50 would be 2 months worth of salary. So two people, they both have a debt. One is obviously much larger than the other one, but the reality is they both have a debt. But neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? And you and I probably know Jesus is not telling this story for no reason. That there is a reason for telling this story that's happening right there in live time. But again, Jesus is trying to show someone who's gotten very confused about what God values in this moment and trying to show him where the true value lies. Because who would the person be in this story that has a larger debt? And we might say, well, just based on where they've been, it would be her. And who is the one with less debt? Well, that would be Simon. Now think about this. A Pharisee was dead serious about following God's direction. They took God's word, the Bible, very seriously. They tried to live out the commandments that are in there. They structured their whole life around it. And so it was not for a lack of trying. But Jesus is also trying to make it real clear. Everybody has a debt. And it's a debt that they cannot repay. So what's going to happen in those moments? And could it be that somebody who has come to the end of herself recognizes, I can't do it. But the person who's dedicated his whole life to living on the right side of the line maybe he has mistakenly come to believe, I can make it. I'm doing good. Why, if we were taking a test, man, I would be beyond the top half of this class. Surely I'm on the right side of the line. A person like that, surely they are on the wrong side of the line. Who do you suppose loved him more after their debt was forgiven? And we obviously know where Jesus has taken us in this story. Well, Simon knows it too. Simon answered, I suppose the one who he canceled a larger debt. That's right, but Simon is still not seeing it. Because Simon, even if you want to put yourself in the other category, you don't owe the huge debt. There's still a debt. And it's a debt that nobody can repay on their own. But she's come to the place of recognizing that. And so she is in a posture of surrender. And she is seeking something that she knows cannot be found in herself, but can be found in Jesus. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, isn't that interesting? Look at this woman kneeling here. Look at her. You judged her, but look at her. And interesting that he notes her posture of surrender. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she came and has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. And from God's perspective, there is tremendous value in someone who has come to recognize that their hope is not in them. It's not in themselves. That there's something that Jesus has that we could never accomplish for ourselves. And so we need to seek that out. And we even need to come to a place of surrender. And here comes the knockout punch by Jesus, because nobody in the room with the categories that they had created would agree with this, but this is Jesus. I tell you, her sins, and they are many. So does Jesus just look the other way and just say, well, it's all good, anything goes? No, he calls it what it is. And that includes her life. And he's not just saying, you know what, it doesn't really matter. Her sins are many, but they have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. Those who think, you know what, all by myself, I'm doing all right. And I don't need the help that can be found outside of myself. Let me picture this for you for just a moment. We talked about some of those garage sales and thrift store things earlier. If you were to walk into this room here today and we had a Rembrandt painting up here, but it had some mud smeared across different parts of it, what would you see? Would you see an object of great value that can be restored and redeemed and returned to the place that it could rightfully hold? Or would you see something ruined by the mud? And I think in so many ways, that's the story that unfolded on that day. This woman walks in. She's notorious. And everybody in the room, except for Jesus, you know what they see? They see the mud. And they think, well, we know how that story is. And that means there's nothing of value there. Jesus looks at it, the same thing, the same person. And he says, this is an object of great value. This is somebody who matters to God. And the truth about all of us, it's how God sees us. God tells us that we matter to him. And there's not one life here today that has not been smeared with some mud of not being all that we want to be, much less a holy God. So what does God see? He sees an object of great value. What will we do? Will we dedicate ourselves to living on the right side of that line, or in an act of surrender, maybe for the first time, will we come and fall down and say, there's a debt, I can't repay it. And Jesus, in you, I need to receive something that I cannot find all by myself. God blesses those who are merciful. When there is an unexpected meeting of somebody's need. And that's what happens on that day. Everybody was not expecting her to leave the forgiven one. God blesses those who are pure in heart. What is that? Integrity. It's being who we are. No masks, no pretending. It's who we really are. And it's being cleansed. How does that happen? The same way it happened for her. Jesus forgives us. We come clean about who we are. We acknowledge it and admit it to the one who is able to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And so in this life that we have been given, if you got mercy, well then give mercy. Meet needs in unexpected ways. Why would we do that? What is the motivation for doing that? It's because that's how God has treated us. There's not one person who has earned their way or deserved their way into a relationship with God. Not one. It's all mercy. And if you got sin, receive forgiveness. That's how we're cleansed. That's how we're washed. That's how we're made right with God. The whole issue on that day was righteousness. What does that mean? Being made right with God. How does that happen? Not by trying to live on the right side of the line, by recognizing, I got a debt I can't pay, but there's someone to whom I can surrender, someone to whom I can seek in him what I do not have in me. And that will change everything. I'm going to invite you to bow your heads together with me. And today, just want to give that opportunity that perhaps for the very first time when it comes to a relationship with God, what Jesus showed on that day, maybe that comes as a surprise to you. Because here in this world, I'm convinced that if we were going to draw up how that happens, it's up to us at the end of the day. And we might even factor some grace from God in, and we might factor his love in, but surely I need to do something, right? And yet this picture shows us, you know how it begins? We just surrender. Maybe inside of our hearts we fall to our knees. We tell the truth about ourselves, who we are. And whether we think our debt is big or little, the reality is we have a debt that we cannot repay. And so we seek his forgiveness. And to the heart that reaches out in that way, that's what he gives us. Forgiveness. And that's the beginning point, but we're invited into a relationship together with God. That's a journey where from that day on, he gets to call the shots. He's the teacher. We're the student. We follow the master. And inside of that, he has promised to lead us toward being fully alive in ways that we cannot find all on our own. And it's not always a straight line. Some journeys have a lot of twists and turns to them. But it's a commitment that he has made to being with us and never leaving us, never forsaking us. And Lord Jesus, thank you that on this day that we can gather together and we can celebrate who you are and the difference that you make. And God, in this world, many times we get the categories of what really matters and what is value. And especially when it comes to you, we can get very confused about that. So God, may we see you on full display. Because when we wonder, what is God really like? All we need to do is look at Jesus, God in the flesh, and we see it. And when we read those words that he spoke, we hear from you. And so God, I pray that you would just lead each one of us closer to you and more and experience more of what you have for us. And God, we thank you for so much mercy along the way. We thank you for your work of purifying and cleansing us in ways that we could never even come close to. So we thank you for this time together. Lead us on together with you, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen.